staff and the public for comments made during this proceedings that may be challenged in a court of law and found to be slanderous. With those comments, could Councillor Thurston, could I ask you to give us a karakia, please?
Mighty God, we ask that you give us wisdom in the decisions we make here today and give us guidance in working with our regional community, both social, economic, environmental, cultural well-being.
Thank you for that. So we have no apologies, but we have Councillor White not present at the moment, so I'll note his lateness, and if we have to adjust that later in the meeting, we'll do. There's no public forum. There's items not on the agenda. There are none. Order of business. Can we please note the public excluded 10.5 priority 1 update on key projects has been deferred to the 5th of April meeting. Declarations of Mr. Thurston.
Chairman, 9.3, and in the absence of Councillor White, in case he joins that discussion and unaware that you've called for conflicts, he's also conflicted as a trustee of the Rotorua Museum Centennial Trust.
Thank you, Councillor Thurston, and could you note mine 10 point, whatever it is?
9.3, Chairman.
10.3 for myself.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for that. Public excluded business to be transferred into the open. There is none. Can we move through to the minutes of the 15th of February? I'll move they be a true, correct record of that meeting. Seconded, Councillor Nees. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Matters arising, Councillor Winters.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, good morning. I was just reading the report from the Ombudsman again about our expectations that he did for us in terms of open for business. In the resolutions on page 14 and 15, number 6, it just talks about existing practices. Are you comfortable that we got the right words there? Because we talked about through the debate that we no longer needed to record every vote at the table. So is that comfortable in terms of that wordsmithing that we recorded that? I'm just, because I moved it, but I'm just looking at those words now and I'm thinking maybe we didn't get it quite right in terms of the resolution to say the existing practices are no recording at the voting, we're live streaming, we're recording. Is that okay for you, sir?
Good morning, and through the chair, you're absolutely correct, Councillor Winters. That was in regard to not recording voting, that particular resolution. So the minutes this time will be very clear in terms of it's specifically related to that matter in the Ombudsman's report, that you're comfortable that existing practices were sufficient.
So do we need a footnote in that number 6? I'm just, if Joe Public reads this, they'll think, what are the existing practices? They may not know. I'm just clarifying, Mr. Chair.
We will amend as per standing orders.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Winters. Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 12, we in the section of the agenda we had presentations from our summer students. There was a request that a copy of the AI development report compiled by Ray Wang be provided to elected members. I'm not sure whether that has been done, and I apologise if I've missed it, but I would like that to be done if that's possible, please.
Through the chair, that report's still being finalised.
Anything else? Right, we'll take that action, Jane. Regional Council minutes of the 6th of March. I move that to be a true, correct record. Seconded, Councillor Nees. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Any matters arising out of those minutes? If not, thank you. We will move on. Reports 9.1. So you've got the chairperson's report. I'll move the adoption of the report, and in doing so, are there any matters there that councillors want any further update or explanation around? Councillors have an update since our regional sector meeting? Yeah, we did. Yeah. Councillor Winters.
Just further, Mr. Chair, we were going to have Hekia Parata present to this council for her investigation into forestry / and where are we up to with that? It was either going to be Committee Māori or Operations and Monitoring. Are we still going down that vein? Because I'd still like to hear from her in terms of that. It's a long bow to pull in your chairperson's report, Mr. Chairman, but I didn't know where to put it.
Through the chair, we'll follow up on that matter and get back to
Thank
you.
And I just want to report too that Māori policy staff have been trying to get Hekia, but she's busy at the moment, but she is on the radar.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, councillor McDonald. Any other questions? Chair's report. Councillors received the briefing paper regarding Te Rahui partnership. Council's position in regard to that? No questions forthcoming from that? Okay. Councillor Nees.
Happy to second your movement. Thank you.
Did I move the resolution?
Yes, you did.
I did. Okay, thank you. Right, thank you. That takes us through to agenda item 9.2, supplier panels update. Linda.
Morena, through the chair. We've submitted the paper. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Linda. So councillors, the paper is available for discussion. Any questions? Councillor?
Millen.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's more of a general question, I suppose. Just around how do you ensure there's enough rigor and competitiveness in terms of quality, I'm particularly thinking about price, but obviously with the quality, not cutting out on quality, but is the pool big enough to ensure that there is enough price competitiveness?
Through the chair, the way panels work, just very briefly, is that they are established across a variety of criteria within a particular area. Open approach goes to the market, and all suppliers who meet the mandatory requirements are then on the panel. What we do with the review process is we check to see whether there are gaps, whether people should come off the panel because of poor performance, whether we need additional depth. So that's part of the process that we've been going through to ensure that we have that robustness in the suppliers that are available, and also where we can address supplier diversity. Within the panel, you have a secondary procurement process, which is where, depending upon the value of the work being done, you either go direct to a panel supplier, or you seek quotes from a number of suppliers, or you open it to all of the panel suppliers. So it's that secondary procurement process that ensures you're checking the quotes and the value for money and the ability to deliver.
I suppose it's when something gets so specialist, like with rivers and drainage engineering, where there's only a few experts that are able to do the work, and then I suppose it could cause a risk of them naming a price and that sort of thing. It's just through this LTP process, someone made a comment how ridiculously expensive the rivers and drainage is, and I suppose it was interesting for me that a member of the public made that comment, and it just made me wonder how that, when you get to really specialist work, how you actually manage to keep the costs, the competitive pricing. And yeah, I mean, it's complex, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McMillan. I have Councillor Nees, Ondarelson, McDonald and Shirley. Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, a matter of confirmation in the recommendation number 2, where we say delegates to the chief executive the ability to approve all contracts, et cetera, under existing council supplier panels. We do mean within our current approved delegations, don't we? It doesn't actually refer to a specific delegation. So I just want to make sure that we're not opening it up to every decision that may relate to a contract.
Be within the financial delegations.
So I just wonder for clarity whether we put that in the resolution to make it very clear. My second question is, how do these panels fit in with decisions to contract out activities to Māori or iwi groups? Because I do know that in some instances we do contract some of these activities out. I presume they're not in the supplier panel. So how do we navigate that?
Through the chair, the panels are used for a lot of the contracting that are done within that area, and it provides a streamlined process. But there is a process where you can complete an exemption. So you complete an exemption that records why it is you're not going to use a panel supplier, and there's an approval process for that exemption, which is linked into existing DFAs, and I sign all exemption requests. And one of the most common grounds for exemption requests will be related to mana whenua contracting or contracting with suppliers who have particular expertise or links to the work. You know, those types of things are exemption grounds.
So it's a joint sign-off between you and the sponsor of the particular panel, is it?
It depends on the DFA. So if it was a lower value valued contract, I would always sign it off, but it would depend on the appropriate DFA for that value of the work.
So could I follow that up and say, how many of those exemptions have you processed in the last 12 months?
I don't know. I can find out that information. I think that it would be a minority of the contracting that is done in the panels. So the majority of panel contracting would be according to the usual process. And it would be a minority that was through exemptions, but I can find out those numbers for you and send them to Comp.
So I think, Chief Executive, we had a commitment to social, I think they referred to it as social procurement. I think we had a commitment to that at some stage. So it'd be just interesting to know how many were actioned on the basis that social procurement as opposed to the open market tender system. Councillor Von Duddleston.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. In the interest of transparency, I'm wondering if it would be reasonable to expect that councillors were given a list of the panel people on the panels, on each of those panels, so that we understand that. And when you do that list, if that's appropriate, then that last question can be probably cleaned up at the same time. So I just want your opinion first, and then if necessary, I would like it added to as a resolution that for transparency, councillors do see just the list of panelists.
So just on that point, Councillor Von Duddleston, I do recall that from time to time we do see the makeup of that list of panelists. So someone from Rivers and Drainage, someone from somewhere else.
It's public information and we can provide that information to you.
Do I need to respond, Linda? No?
Only to confirm that we can provide that information to you. Just for general context, there are 47 suppliers on the integrated catchments panel. There are 37 suppliers on the rivers and drainage. So, there is a reasonable number of suppliers on each of those panels, but we can give you a list of their names.
So just clarification then. So the panel is made up of the suppliers. It's not a group.
Oh, no.
So just give me some clarity on that, because I might be asking the wrong question.
through the chair, when we talk about the panel, we're talking about the panel of suppliers that are available to do particular types of work. So maybe the terminology is a little bit confusing, but the panel is set up. It's a panel of suppliers which are available to staff to be able to contract under a panel arrangement, and that panel arrangement is what was set out in the original procurement plan, which was approved by council, which set out the procurement process that was to be gone through for those suppliers to contract the work with them.
So I think I've got the right, my request is invalid because it's not what I was asking for. I thought there was a panel that actually evaluated that went up for the final selection.
Yes, through chair. As I say, it is a little bit confusing. When the original establishment of the panels was undertaken, there would have been an evaluation team, and that team would have evaluated all of the proposals that came in from the potential suppliers, and that team would have made the decision that yes, they met our mandatory requirements, and so we're able to join the panel.
More like a tender pool, isn't it? Like a tender pool as opposed to a panel.
So that's a question Councillor von Duddleston was asking. Who are the evaluators in terms of looking at these contracts?
Yeah.
Through the chair, it will have varied depending upon the individual panel. So, for example, we most recently set up the science panel, which is a pool of suppliers available to provide science services, and the team that was available to evaluate those would have included staff from the science teams who were best placed to technically evaluate those suppliers' ability to deliver the services, and there would always be a representative from the commercial team who would also be part of the team to ensure probity, due diligence and compliance with the process.
Mr. Chair, I know this is just stretching the bow a little bit to this thing, but the consent services panel is of concern to me in that I don't believe we utilise enough. I'm a believer in actually having Bay of Plenty people looking at Bay of Plenty decisions because they understand the issues, and I see no transparency in that process, and there's around this room there's a lot of ex-mayors and qualified people who could assist on these hearings, consent hearings, and I think we need to address that, and it might be that it needs to come to a workshop or to it's not really fitting into this topic, but I just highlight that as a concern because I think we're underutilising our own people, and I want to ensure that whoever we use has a very good understanding of the issues that this region faces. It's called localism, and it's something that we should all be striving for. Thank you.
So we can bring, that's a separate list. That's the commissioners that are used in terms of consent hearings. This is about our consent services panel, but we can certainly bring you that list and the methodology in terms of how commissioners are selected. It's something that we frequently look at in terms of ensuring that we have commissioners who can do the job for us. Yep, and we can bring that to you.
Councillor McDonald.
My question was really based around what Jane has already raised, but I also want to pick up on the comments that Councillor von Duddleston has said, and that's around through the whole LT consultation process. What's been expressed to me from Tangata Whenua, iwi runanga, is the question around how does council look at this very issue we're talking about, and where does Tangata Whenua sit in regard to being a supplier of the services that we're actually talking about today. So I think it will come through we'll express that through the LTP submission process. So it's really about being added, I guess, to whatever list you have. And really they're looking and taking on board what Andrew has mentioned around localism. They totally support that too, but getting down to their specific role as mana whenua with each of the rohe that they belong to is a consideration of being a supplier, where some of them are already working in projects and partnerships, but they realise there is no formality around them being considered by council in a formal process in what we're talking about today. So I guess my question is, and I'm a bit concerned in your comments around when you responded around the I guess the inability to respond on the number of
Exemptions.
exception, yes. And so that, to me, that's a concern. So in the report that you're going to bring back to us, I would like a deeper dive into how tangata whenua are positioned in that list, because I think it is something that's going to be flagged to us in the submission process.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Councillor Shirley, then Mr Eadie.
Thank you, Chair. Linda, a very specific line of inquiry. We had a meeting of the Kaituna Catchment and Drainage Advisory Group a fortnight back, and a matter arose there with regard to the Ford Road pump station. And there's a lot of concern. It's as you appreciate, a very expensive project, and it's a targeted rate, so the people there are sort of paying it. But they made the point that the Ford Road pump station had not gone out to tender, and they was just seeking assurance that there was adequate transparency and that it was a competitive price. How does the panel system work in that regard to ensure that we are getting the best value for money for what is a very expensive project?
Through the chair, I confirm that contracting was done under an exemption. So there was a set of paperwork that recorded the grounds for that direct appointment. I don't have that immediately in front of me, but I can easily find that information and share it with you. From recollection, the exemption grounds were around the efficiencies which could be built into the pricing and the project management because of similar and related work that the same supplier had done. So as I say, from memory, those exemption grounds were very much focused on cost savings and efficiencies, and that is often a ground. To a certain extent, there is a good awareness within the regional council of market rates, contractors' ability, that type of thing. So there is always a consideration of value for money.
Thank you. Look, I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to. Mr DeMonchi, the Ford Road pump station relocation is a multidisciplined project. As you know, you've got roading, you've got new pumps, you've got infrastructure, etc. Where have we got to with securing the access to that? Because last time I looked at it, it was essentially on the goodwill of the landowner that we're accessing that. Have we formalised that agreement in terms of having a permanent easement or purchasing a right?
If I may, Mr Chair, defer that question to when Mark Townsend comes in to present on a subsequent paper. He'll have that information, and I don't know the exact status of the legal access at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Mr Eadie.
Kia ora, Mr Chair. Do we have any procedures or policy with regards to this process in terms of social procurement? Is there any policy that's actually social procurement policy?
Through the chair, there is no policy. We have various guidelines that have been developed by the commercial team to raise awareness and facilitate social procurement being incorporated into procurement decisions. We use the term broader outcomes, which is the government term, but it kind of covers the same types of issues as social procurement. And the broader outcomes guidance from government, provides details of the types of things that can be considered. I'm happy to give you some examples of some of the guidance that we have provided, but essentially, with every procurement that comes through the commercial team, questions are asked about broader outcomes. It's part of our procurement plan. It's part of what our commercial advisors are there to prompt the discussion and to formulate appropriate broader outcomes criteria within any procurement. There's quite a degree of flexibility because every procurement is different, and so the broader outcomes that are going to be relevant to each procurement will be slightly different, but certainly the prompt of broader outcomes consideration is there with every procurement, and as I say, it's part of every procurement plan.
Holder, I'm just wondering whether we might benefit from the development of some specific social procurement policy so that we're then able to measure how we're shifting the dial on that, or whether indeed we want to shift the dial on that.
So through the chair, from the comments that Councillor McDonald has made, I think that's something for your deliberations in May. If there are submissions coming to you through the long-term plan process, that may be something that you consider as part of your deliberations.
Yeah. Councillor White, then Macmillan.
Kia ora, Chair. I support in total what Councillor McDonald has said, but just a question for me. Social procurement, and obviously being a council representative on Quayside Holdings Limited, are our expectations of social procurement embedded in? Just remind me of this. Embedded in the expectations with Quayside as well, because I know that Quayside is conscious of social procurement, but is there a translation from what's being said here into the expectations of Quayside, for example? Is there, Mr. Chair, is there that connection? Expectation around procurement issues?
So through the chair, there is no expectation in your letters of expectation to Quayside in regards to social procurement. Yeah.
I think, councillors, we've just got to be careful in terms of the definition of social procurement, because from what I know of some of the people who contract to this council, they are Māori owned and led, but they don't necessarily appear as a Māori trust or an entity. So we've got to be careful how we delineate what we actually mean in terms of social procurement. I mean, a big one that, because it's all public information, on here, the rivers and drainage work is Wilson Brothers Earth Moving. Harry Wilson is Māori. Gets a lot of work off the regional council, but he doesn't necessarily, it's a bit like, he's not on the Māori roll, he's on the general roll. That's the analogy, I think.
I think my comments in terms of policy development in this area was around that.
Yeah.
What is our definition of social procurement? I think we need to talk about that a bit further.
Thanks, Toy. Councillor Macmillan.
Just on that, I can send round an update because it's something I've been sort of inquiring about for a while in terms of social procurement and tangata whenua procurement. And we've got the Heara Whiwhinga Māori Services Procurement Guidelines. I suppose with all of this information that I've received, not all that recently, but this year, I suppose, my understanding is that it's pretty baked in terms of our social procurement and Māori Services Procurement Guidelines. But I tautoko Toy's thoughts around having a policy where there's measures in place for that. And I suppose my assumption is that was measured. So yeah, maybe it's something that can tighten up a bit, but yeah, that's all I want to say. I'll send that round.
Could I just add, and it might be worthwhile that we put a flow chart on papers that come to council in terms of the importance of the procurement plan for sizable contracts, and they are approved through council. So just to be very clear in terms of your role in terms of approving of those procurement plans is the first step. So I think that's, Linda, we can outline the process for councillors in terms of their role in terms of approving those procurement plans as the first point for large contracts.
Thank you, Fiona. Anything else, councillors? If not, I'll make some concluding remarks, Linda. So I read the first paragraph under Rivers and Drainage Review identified the need to separate cartage and quarry services. Now, we had a large amount of discussion here about the merits or otherwise of stockpiling. I think staff have to look at the commercial approach to how some people do business. So if you congregate quarry services with cartage, a commercial operator may well take a loss leader on one of those activities. So it's the total price in terms of the service that you need to look at. If staff want to start segmenting it out and have a very clear clinical approach to this, you're probably not going to get the best economic outcome on behalf of council. So I'll just ask them to reflect on that. Right.
Mr. Chairman, I can just confirm the answer to your question before. Kathy Theolarden advises that road access and potential purchase of the pump station areas are still subject to negotiation, but land entry for construction and covenant over the planting areas have both been confirmed.
Thank you. And I'll just remind you of the difficulty you got into in this catchment. Well, I think it was the Bell Road catchment in terms of council access to those bores that we're essentially prohibited from going on to. So that's why the importance of having this in a legal capture is, I think, really important. Right. Resolution. I'll move the resolution on page 24 with the addition of, within financial delegations to meet Jane's request.
Yep, happy with that.
Okay, seconded councillor Winters. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. 9.3.
Staff have been working with Rotorua Lakes Council to prepare a funding agreement for the Rotorua Museum development. It's been to council several times and several conditions have been raised by councillors. As we've gone through the history of checking all the council resolutions have been met, we've discovered there's actually no formal delegation to the chief executive to approve this contract or to make payments against that contract. Our normal practice is that we would seek non-negotiable conditions from council and then delegate to the chief executive. So we're proposing that if you agree that we are meeting your intent with this project, we have 3 years of free access for Bay of Plenty residents, and that any contribution to the building works is on the last in, first out basis that was discussed late last year or early this year, that we seek delegation to the chief executive to approve the funding agreement and to make payments against the funding agreement.
Thank you, Mr. McCom. Councillor Crosby.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Mark. I agree with the general principle. The only question I have and a bit of an issue is on page 29, where the Bay of Plenty residents have free entry to the museum for 3 years. For general admission, that's fine, but often museums at a huge cost will bring in a special exhibition where they often may charge a particular entry fee to go to that particular exhibition, and I don't think we should fetter that opportunity through this. Now, it takes some guidance from museum type people, but I do know that it costs a lot of money to bring in a particular exhibition, and I think they should retain the right to charge for that if they choose to do so. GA, fine.
Councillor Thurston, then White.
Just a point of clarification, Chairman, I fully support what Councillor Crosby said, but I suggest you change it to just general entry to the museum for 3 years. And that precludes, as he's highlighted, special exhibitions of visiting artists and major, exhibitions.
Councillor White.
But Mr. Chair, I support that absolutely. I spent 6.5 years at Te Papa as a Kaihotu, and special exhibitions were chargeable to all people because of the costs involved in importing expertise and everything else that goes with it.
Happy to move, Mr Chair.
Thank you, councillor Winters. Seconded, councillor Eady. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried.